I've got a basement I'm doing some drywall work in today. It's basically just enlarging this one bedroom. They're adding another bedroom with a closet and a little area over there where I guess is going to be a small little kitchen. I brought in the drywall last week. I got like 24 sheets. And a lot of times these basement jobs are a bit of a nightmare because they're not accessible. But this worked out really well. There's a nice door. It's a walkout basement. And I was even able to drive around to the back side to load it in. So this is not going to be too bad of a job. The ceilings here are probably around 9 feet high. They are going to put a drop ceiling in, so I'm only hanging the drywall up 8 feet. I'm working alone, so I'm going to hang the top sheet first. I'm going to use my drywall, Hang Pro drywall lift for walls. So I'm going to hang the top sheet first and then the bottom sheet, just how I would if there was going to be a ceiling. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure up 8 feet and put a screw or a nail, and then when I hang the drywall, I'm going to lift it up to that point. It's just easier for me to do it that way. If I were to hang the bottom sheet first, then I would actually have to physically lift the second sheet and set it on top of it. So doing it this way is going to be a little easier for me. I'm going horizontal with everything. Like this wall here is probably about 10 feet long. So I'm going horizontal, so I'll have about a 10-foot seam. If I went vertical, I would have a seam on this stud right here and then one over here. So I'd have about 16 feet of seam on that wall instead of the 10. So that's why I'm doing that. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm going to hang this wall. There's going to be suspended ceiling in here. So I'm going to hang the top sheet first. So I want to get a mark on this wall because I'm going to raise my drywall up to it a little over 8 feet high. This corner bead is about 8 feet 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to put a screw a little bit above the height of this. So when I hang my drywall, I'm just going to lift it right up to that screw. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. The corner bead helps me do this because I don't have to get a tape measure out and fight with that. I'm just simple. Okay, so that's good. Now I'm just going to cut a piece of drywall and I'll show you how easy it is to hang. All right, what I have here is I have a piece of drywall already cut to the length of this wall, and I'm going to hang the top sheet first. I've got a screw up there a little over 8 feet high and another one over here. So I'm going to lift this sheet right up to it. But I'm working alone. I don't really want to lift it by myself and try and hold it and fasten it. So I've got my drywall lift for walls here that I'm going to show you how easy it is to use. Center on the sheet. Then I just lift the panel just a little bit to get it on the cradle. Now I lean it right against the wall and crank it right up. Winching it right up till it hits those screws. So that's right where I want it. Now I just fasten the top edge. Now I just lower the cradle and I can finish fastening the panel. so I have it on the cradle, and what I like to do is I go above the other sheet just a little bit, so actually it's lapping the upper sheet. And now I just lower it a little bit. Let it fall right into the, and then I just crank it right back up. So there you go. Now it's held right in place, nice and tight the whole length. And I just take my screw gun and I fasten it along that top edge. Just something I'm always thinking about, you know, the process of hanging this room. This is a closet. It's about 8.5 feet in length. Now I won't be able to get a sheet in. I won't be able to come into this room and just guide it into this closet and hang that back wall. I actually have to put the sheet through this wall here. So I'm gonna hang the back wall first and this upper wall with the header on it for the door before I hang any end panels or before I hang that wall in the outside hallway. So that's what I'm gonna do now is first thing I'm gonna do today is hang these closet walls. You can see I've already hung the back wall in the closet in the other room. And that's really how you have to be thinking, or you're gonna end up with an extra seam inside this closet. All right, what I have here is working in the basement. I've already hung the bottom 2 pieces of drywall on this wall. Now I need to lift this approximately 10-foot piece of drywall up and set it on top of that. I'm just gonna take the panel and simply lift it off the cradle and sit it right in place. It works really well in this situation because I have a closet door here, so I'm able to get my hands underneath it without pinching myself. When I hang drywall, I just hang the sheet. I do all my cutouts afterwards. In other words, there's actually an electrical outlet box right here behind this wall. So before I've actually hung any drywall, I went through and I marked with a pencil on the floor where the location of every stud is. And I've also put an X on the floor directly below where I have an electrical outlet. And prior to hanging any drywall, I knew that all the electrical outlets to the center of that outlet box was 22 inches off the floor. So that's what I have them mark, 22 inches off the floor, directly above that X. And I use a drywall router to cut this out. So the bottom is not fastened at all, it's nice and loose, so that way it's not causing a lot of pressure against the electrical box. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put the router on this mark into the box, go to the edge of the box, and then jump over that edge, and then route it around the outside in a counterclockwise direction. One thing I always do as I'm approaching the end of my cut is I take pressure off the panel, because I don't want a lot of pressure against this, because as I approach the end of the cut it becomes kind of weak and it'll bust out on me. So I have my toe against the drywall to hold it tight, but I'm going to just release that pressure as I approach the very end of this cut. Then after I cut it out, I always gently push it into place to make sure that it's cut out properly. So that's a nice cut. The reason you have to be so careful with this is the boxes are quite large and the outlet covers are quite small. They barely cover 1/3 of an inch around the perimeter of this box. So anything 1/4 inch or 3/8 off a little bit when you're cutting is going to need to be packed. So it's worth taking your time to do a nice job. Here's a wall that actually goes over the top of this door. So I'm not even cutting it at all. I'm just going to let it float over the top of this door, and then we'll cut it around there later. So that looks good. I've got a screw that's, my lift is holding it right up to right in this corner, and it's even with the other piece of drywall over here. This is typically how I hang a piece of drywall. I got this doorway, and I did not pre-cut it. So in other words, I've got to cut this little square, rectangular piece out. So I just go ahead and I fasten the drywall around that opening. And now I just need to cut this out. Now it can be done with a router. I can actually cut up this edge with a router and cut across. But let me show you another technique that I like to use. And this is something that I did a lot of when I first went into business, because I didn't really actually use a router that much. It's called the drywall saw. It's quite a stiff blade. It's got a lot of set in it. It's actually pretty dull, because all we need to do is cut through drywall. So I'm just going to run this right up alongside this stud, and I can kind of feel it as I push the saw in. I can feel it pushing the edge of the saw against that stud. And because I don't want to tear the good face of the drywall, when I bring the saw back out, I have no pressure on it. I'm just pulling it out very lightly. I push forward, and I pull it back lightly. Push forward, back lightly. Now, I have this top edge to do, which is a little bit awkward to do with a saw, although I can do that. But let me show you a little bit easier way. I was just using my utility knife, and I go along the back side, and I cut right along the bottom of this top header stud here. So I've cut along the back side of it with my knife, and now that just hinges forward, and I'm able to just cut that off very easily. Now, the other little thing that I want to point out here is, before I cut it out, you'll notice that I only put 2 screws in, one here and one up here. I didn't put the rest of them in because I'm going to do that after I get it cut out. And the reason is, I want to keep these screws pretty close to the edge. See how those screws are only maybe an inch or so from the edge of this stud? By keeping it close to the edge, I don't have to coat them with joint compound later. The casing is going to cover that. If I were to keep the screw out 2 inches, and most of the time I would have to put joint compound over it. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but throughout a whole house or throughout a whole job, it ends up to be a lot of time and effort kind of wasted. So this is a nice little trick. I'm going to show you how I use a foot lift to hang this bottom sheet. Get the bottom close to the wall, and kick it in nice and tight. And really, you can see right here, I only have to lift it about 1/4 of an inch or so. What I'm watching is how tight it is here and how tight it is into that corner on the other sheet. And I'm liking what I see, so I'm going to start putting some screws in it. That looks good. Over in this corner, I have a box for a light switch. So I'm just going to make sure that that's up tight how I want it, and it is. So that's all I'm doing for now is I've got the screws along the top edge. I've got one close to this electrical switch box here, and I'm not doing the bottom right now because I've got an outlet right here that I have to cut out, and I don't want to have pressure against it. So no more screws are going into this panel until I've cut out these openings. What I have here is I have the long sheet already hung and it's gone past this doorway. I didn't cut it to the right length because I didn't need to. I'm trying to save time. I know it's a little over 8 feet, so I hung a 10-footer. I got about 12 or 14 inches overhanging. So all I'm really having to do is I just take my utility knife and I just go along the back side here and I just score the drywall right along the edge of that stud along this door. And I just fold it forward. Now I just take my knife and I cut it right along that crease. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure, just going through the paper. Now when I go to tear this off, I always go against it. So I push that way. But because if I pulled it this way, I might actually tear some paper and have a little bit of a repair. And once again, now I'm going to put the rest of the screws in along this edge, keeping them tight to the edge, right along the edge, about 1 inch in at the most. Okay, I have all the drywall hung. I just thought I would do a little walkthrough to show you what we've done here. There's a closet with the one piece. The piece that I cut out from this door, I actually used inside this closet for this end wall, because I'm not that particular about, you know, seams in a closet, rather than throw out a piece of drywall. But this is what I wanted to talk about also, is the fact that we went horizontal. This wall here is about 9 feet long, so I have about a 9 foot long seam. And if I had stood it up, I would have had about 16 feet of seam. Same thing on this wall over here. Let's just talk a little bit about fastening. I put 2 in the face, so they're about 16 inches on center. The screws have to be set pretty accurately. Let's see, this one here is really good. It's about 1 millimeter below the surface. If they're too deep, they're prone to popping. Here we had one that was a miss, and I actually removed it. You don't just tap the miss screw in, you actually have to remove it. Here's a long wall. This wall here is about 18 feet long. So I did have a butted seam. I put the butted seam in one spot on this wall because I back blocked it. I actually have a piece of material that goes behind it. Makes it a very stable, recessed seam. Before I start taping, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a little pre-filling. Things that need pre-filling is any little gaps. Like here I have a butted seam where the old wall ties into the new. I'm going to put a little compound in there. Oh, and here's another good example. I have an inside corner with pretty big gaps. I'm going to mix up some setting compound and pre-fill all these little areas that, hey, you don't have a gap, a 1/4 inch or more, before I start doing any taping. I use a setting compound because that allows me to start taping right away. I don't have to worry about waiting for it to dry, because with a setting compound you can coat over it right away.